Warning: the following contains images of graphic violence and not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950. She grew up in Sarstedt, a small town near Hildesheim, Lower Saxony, West Germany, where her parents had fled from East Prussia after the Second World War. Bachmeier was raised in a conservative home with devoutly religious parents. Her father, previously a member of the Waffen-SS, was the stereotypical authoritarian figure, a heavy drinker who spent much of his time at a bar close to the family home. Their household was not pleasant, and drinking made her father more aggressive. Her parents divorced, and her mother later remarried. Bachmeier was perceived as a troubled adolescent by what she described as a dictatorial stepfather, and her mother eventually kicked her out of the house. In 1966, aged 16, Bachmeier had her first child, whom she placed for adoption as an infant. She became pregnant again at the age of 18 by her boyfriend. Bachmeier was raped shortly before the birth of her second child. Her second child was also placed for adoption as an infant. Bachmeier began dating the manager of Tipesa, a pub where they both worked, in 1972. She became pregnant for the third time at the age of 22. On November 14, 1972, Bachmeier's third child, Anna, was born, and she raised her alone. As a result, Bachmeier took Anna to work at the pub, and she was said to never feel a need to rush home after her regular hours. In two 1984 documentary films, No Time for Tears, The Bachmeier Case and Anna's Mother, Bachmeier was portrayed as a single mother who worked well into the night and then slept into the day, leaving her 7-year-old daughter on her own during the day. Bachmeier was aware of her problematic lifestyle and wanted to put Anna up for adoption. Friends later said that she treated Anna like a little adult, and from a young age, expected her to take care of many things on her own. Anna frequently slept in the bar as her mother partied. According to a friend of Bachmeier, Anna was a vibrant youngster who never truly had a pleasant family life.
What would you do if you came face to face with your child's killer? Would you take the life of a monster, knowing you might become a monster yourself? These were some of the questions Marianne Bachmeier asked herself in March 1981 as she headed to the trial of her daughter's killer, Klaus Grabowski. What happened to Marianne after she killed her daughter's killer? And what's the dark and tragic story behind her daughter's gruesome murder? Let's find out. Welcome to Crime City. Today's story begins in Lübeck, Germany, or West Germany, as this happened back in the 1970s before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950, the daughter of refugees from East Prussia. She was a struggling single mom. She had given up her first 2 daughters for adoption, but when she had her third child, Anna, she decided she was going to make it work. She was now running a pub and had just about enough means to take care of a tiny one. It wasn't just the lack of money or a stable partner that led Marianne to give up her first 2 children for adoption. She'd been raised by very, very strict parents. Her father was an ex-SS soldier who liked to drink, pass judgment, and got easily infuriated. Her mother also had a short temper, and both parents were also stern Christians, so they hated Marianne's more wild and free lifestyle, and they always fought. After Marianne's parents got divorced and her mom remarried, Marianne got kicked out of the house. Her mom was blaming all her relationship problems on her rebelling. Age 16, Marianne ended up pregnant and without a stable home. When she gave birth to a baby daughter, she gave her away. 2 years later, she became pregnant again with a boy from her high school. And when she was days away from giving birth, she was violated by a stranger at a disco. Needless to say, this was deeply traumatic for Marianne, and she was sure she couldn't raise this child well either. So her second daughter was also adopted. After graduating from high school, Marianne got a job as a waitress at the pub she would eventually run. This gave her a place to stay, right above the pub, and soon she began a relationship with the manager, Christian. Marianne wanted her child this time. Christian felt differently. He wasn't ready to be a father or a husband. So they parted ways, and Marianne gave birth to Anna on November 14, 1972. Nothing could keep them apart, she thought. Anna grew up into a happy, open-minded child. But because Marianne often worked night shifts, she slept during the day, leaving her daughter to play or socialize with neighbors outside for hours, unsupervised. On the morning of May 5th, 1980, Anna was supposed to go to school, but she was angry at her mom. They'd had an argument the night before, and since she was sleeping, Marianne couldn't check on her daughter. Anna grabbed her backpack and headed to a friend's house on foot, but her friend was at school, so Anna had to get back home. But she decided to take the long way home. Meanwhile, Marianne got up and headed to an appointment that would last till after Anna's school hours ended. When she got back home, she was surprised to see her 7-year-old daughter wasn't there. She wasn't at her friends' houses either. By the end of the day, Marianne reported Anna missing. The next day, a woman walked into the police station. She wanted to report a murder. Her 35-year-old fiancé, Klaus Grabowski, had taken the life of little Anna. Klaus was Marianne's neighbor and worked as a butcher, but he had a terrible criminal record that involved child molestation. The day before, Anna stopped by Klaus's house and asked if she could play with his cats. This wasn't the first time she was visiting or entertaining the cats, but it was the first time she was home alone with Klaus. His fiancé was away at work. Klaus helped Anna inside his apartment for hours before strangling her with his fiancé's pantyhose. Then, he stashed her body in a cardboard box and left it on the bank of a canal. Luckily, he told his fiancée enough to get himself arrested that day. When the police took him into custody, he confirmed the whole story. Now, you might ask, if Klaus had such a dark criminal record, why was he free and allowed near children? Back in the early 1970s, he was arrested for violating 2 underage girls. He was sent to a psychiatric evaluation where the doctor concluded, "On the convincing testimony of the doctor that evaluated Mr. Grabowski, the board is undoubtedly certain that the abnormal sexual instinct of the accused is addictive." He was sent to a psychiatric hospital where he was offered 2 options: spend an indefinite amount of time there or receive chemical castration. He chose the second option. As far as justice was concerned, this was punishing enough. But it didn't diminish Klaus's urges, and 2 years later, he chemically reversed his castration after lying to a doctor. He ended up doing even worse to poor Anna. And this is not the only outrageous story when it comes to Klaus. When the police arrested him for Anna's murder, he said he did it, but somehow he blamed it on Anna. He claimed that on May 5th, Anna came to his home to extort him for money. She told him to give her money or otherwise she would tell her mom that he touched her private parts. Yeah, that's exactly what a 7-year-old would do. So he panicked and told her he would get the money, but instead strangled her to death. When Marianne found out what had happened to her daughter, she was infuriated. And imagine how she felt when she heard Klaus wasn't really owning up to it. Marianne behaved so strangely after this that the police started looking at her suspiciously. She refused to come to the morgue and identify her daughter, and there would be days on end that she wouldn't leave her house. In the days that she would, there would be constant tantrums. Marianne was overwhelmed with anger, grief, and guilt. She couldn't get it out of her head that her last interaction with Anna was a fight, and she felt that Anna fell into a monster's hands because of that fight. Otherwise, she would have gone to school as usual. It took 10 long months from Anna's murder to Klaus's trial. When it finally began, Marianne was hoping for a simple one. Klaus killed her 7-year-old daughter and he should rot in prison. But his defense team made it a long, harrowing process. They painted him as a sort of victim of hormonal imbalance, that the chemical castration he received years before only made him worse and that he couldn't control his addiction. Then they painted Marianne as a neglectful mother that only cared about work and social fun and often forgot about her daughter, letting her play in the streets by herself. While it was never revealed if Anna was also violated before her life was taken, we can only assume the worst considering his history. Marianne went through a myriad of nasty emotions throughout the trial. By now, the trial was making headlines throughout Germany, and Marianne had already begun a divisive character. Some people felt for her, and others judged her for being a careless mother. When Klaus testified, it got even more difficult for Marianne. She had to listen to Anna's killer describing his victim's very last moments. She fought hard for her life, knocking over the chair she was sitting in. Klaus watched her last breath come out of her nose. Then he watched her for several minutes before he decided he would dump her in a canal. Then came the doctor who gave Klaus the reverse castration injection. He was held responsible for it. Why hadn't he checked Klaus's criminal record before giving him the testosterone injection? At that time, chemical castration was given to sex offenders with serious criminal histories. The doctor should have figured Klaus was lying. The doctor confessed to feeling deep regret about his actions that day, and he didn't suffer any punishment. Marianne and Christian had even filed a lawsuit against him, but it was dropped as none of his colleagues would testify against him. On the second day of the trial, Marianne overheard a conversation between the judge and the defense attorney. She understood that Klaus would give another statement on the third day. This was another chance at getting a lesser charge. On March 6, 1981, Marianne entered the courtroom once again. She held her hands in her pockets as she approached the benches. She walked from the front door to the chair where Klaus was sitting, waiting to give his testimony. Then, she carried out her plan. Marianne shot Klaus 8 times as she called him pig. 7 of the bullets reached his back, and the first 6 were lethal. Marianne didn't resist her arrest. She only commented, "He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Anna's father, Christian, watched the whole ordeal. He'd been an on-and-off father to Anna, but he loved her deeply, and he was grieving along with Marianne. He'd seen Marianne's emotional state since losing Anna, and he knew she was very angry at Klaus, but he never thought she would go that far. When Marianne shot Klaus, Christian muttered,
"She did it. She actually did it."
During her trial, Marianne said that she'd dreamt of shooting Klaus and had seen visions of Anna in the courtroom. A doctor who examined her said he'd asked Marianne for a handwriting sample, and Marianne wrote, "I did it for you, Anna." She also drew 7 hearts on the paper, 1 for each year of Anna's life. When she testified, Marianne commented about the conversation she'd heard the previous day in the courthouse. "I heard he wanted to make a statement. I thought, now comes the next lie about this victim who was my child." To cover the expenses of the trial, Marianne sold her life story to Stern magazine. This way, the country knew even more about her past struggles. She was hailed as the ultimate revenge mother. In 1983, she was sentenced to 6 years in prison. 3 years later, she was released on parole. Even her sentence was divisive. According to a survey by the Allensbach Institute, 28% of Germans deemed her 6-year sentencing as an appropriate penalty for her actions. Another 27% considered the sentence too heavy, while 25% viewed it as too light. In June 1985, Marianne was free. She moved to Nigeria and married a man. She was there until the early 1990s when she divorced him. That's when she decided she would change countries again. She moved to Sicily, Italy. But soon enough, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, aged just 44. By now, Germany was unified. Marianne knew she had very little time left, so she returned back home and requested Lucas Maria Balmer, a reporter for DNR, to film her last weeks alive. Visiting Anna's grave again, she decided she would be buried next to her. Marianne even reunited with one of the daughters she'd given up for adoption, Natasha. Marianne tried to set all of her affairs in order, and she did so on TV, hoping that the world would remember her more as a person than a monster. She died on September 17, 1996, at the age of 46. She was buried next to her daughter.